Sharon Tate was 8 months pregnant when she was murdered inside her home at 150 Cielo Drive. She was only 26 years old, a rising actress, a wife, a woman waiting to become a mother, gone in a single night. And when the news reached Hollywood, it did not feel like another crime story. It felt like the night the dream cracked open. On the morning of August 9, 1969, Sharon's name was no longer attached only to beauty, film roles, magazine photographs, or the golden promise of a young star. It was attached to a house in Benedict Canyon, to police cars outside a gate, to headlines that seemed too brutal to belong to the same world as red carpets and studio lights. Inside that house, Sharon had been with her friends Jay Sebring, Abigail Folger, and Wojciech Frykowski. Outside, a young man named Stephen Parent was also killed. Roman Polanski, her husband, was away in Europe. The home was supposed to be a place of waiting for a child, waiting for a family, waiting for the next chapter of a life that still looked full of light. By sunrise, it had become one of the darkest addresses in American culture. What made the shock so unbearable was the contrast. Sharon Tate was not remembered as someone already fading from fame. She was not old, forgotten, or broken by years of scandal. She was young. She was photographed in sunlight. She belonged to the soft glamour of the 1960s. Blonde hair, gentle eyes, a face the camera seemed to adore. To the public, she looked like possibility itself. But after that night, every image of her changed meaning. A smile became painful. A movie still became a memorial. A magazine photo became a reminder of everything that had been taken before it could fully arrive. The detail that haunted people most was not simply that Sharon died, but that she died while carrying her unborn son. She was standing at the edge of motherhood, close enough to the future to almost touch it. And then, in one night, that future disappeared with her. Hollywood had always sold the idea that fame could turn life into something untouchable. Sharon's death proved the opposite. It showed that even the most beautiful dream could be invaded by darkness. The headlines spread quickly, and with them came fear. Cielo Drive became more than a location. It became a symbol of the moment Hollywood lost its innocence. Behind the gates and canyon roads, behind the beautiful houses and private parties, people suddenly felt exposed. The murder of Sharon Tate and the others did not stay inside one home. It moved through Los Angeles like a cold wind. Stars became afraid, doors were locked, rumors multiplied. The bright freedom of the late 1960s suddenly felt dangerous, as if the dream had always carried a shadow underneath it. And yet, underneath all the public panic, there was a quieter tragedy. Sharon herself was being swallowed by the story of how she died. The crime was so shocking that it threatened to erase the woman before it. Before the police reports, before the trials, before the endless retellings, Sharon Tate had been a person still becoming, a young actress still learning her own strength, a wife waiting for her husband to return, a mother waiting for her child. That is where her story truly hurts, not only in the violence of the ending, but in the tenderness of everything that was about to begin. Before Sharon Tate became a symbol of Hollywood tragedy, before her name was tied forever to Cielo Drive, she was a girl who learned early that home could be temporary. Born in Dallas, Texas, Sharon grew up in a military family, and that meant movement. New cities, new schools, new rooms, new faces. Her father's career took the family from place to place, and by the time she was still a teenager, Sharon had already lived the kind of childhood where leaving became almost normal. But wherever she went, people noticed her, not because she was loud, not because she fought for attention. Sharon had a quiet, almost fragile beauty that made people look twice. As a child and teenager, she entered beauty contests, posed for photographs, and slowly became used to being seen. But being seen is not the same as being known. That would become one of the quiet tragedies of her life. Long before Hollywood turned her into an image, the world around her had already started treating her face like her destiny. When her family moved to Italy, something began to shift. Sharon was still young, still unsure, but Europe gave her a first glimpse of the world beyond ordinary life. She appeared as an extra in films, moved around movie sets, and felt the strange electricity of cameras, costumes, and people pretending to be someone else. It was not yet fame, it was not yet Hollywood. But it was the first door opening. People around her began to suggest that maybe she belonged in front of the camera. And slowly, the idea followed her back to America. Sharon did not arrive in Hollywood as a finished star. She arrived as a young woman whose beauty opened doors before her confidence could catch up. She appeared in commercials, television roles, and small parts, still learning how to stand inside an industry that loved her face before it fully understood her talent. In those early years, there was something painfully innocent about her rise. She was not chasing scandal. She was not trying to become a legend. She was simply stepping closer and closer to a machine that could turn a young woman into a dream, and then forget she was human. Keywords for V.
By the time Sharon Tate stepped deeper into Hollywood, the industry itself was changing. The old studio system was fading, youth culture was rising, and the 1960s were turning movie stars into more than actors. They became symbols. They became moods. They became faces that carried the fantasies of an entire generation. Sharon arrived at exactly that moment, not with the loud hunger of someone trying to force her way into fame, but with a softness that made the camera slow down. She seemed to drift into the frame rather than enter it, quiet but impossible to ignore. Before the major films came, there were television appearances, modeling jobs, commercials, publicity photos, and small roles that taught her how Hollywood looked at her. And the camera loved her almost immediately. It loved the blonde hair, the gentle eyes, the strange balance between innocence and sensuality. But Hollywood's love was rarely innocent. It did not simply see Sharon Tate as a young actress trying to grow. It saw an image it could sell, a beautiful face that could stop people in front of a poster, a magazine cover, a movie still. Her first major film step came with Eye of the Devil in 1966, a dark and gothic project where Sharon appeared mysterious, distant, almost unreal.
She did not yet carry the whole story, but she carried atmosphere. Then came The Fearless Vampire Killers in 1967, the film that changed not only her career, but her private life. It brought her close to Roman Polanski, a rising European director whose world felt sharper, stranger, and more artistic than polished Hollywood. Their relationship quickly became part of Sharon's public image.
Together, they looked like the perfect couple for the new era. Young, fashionable, photographed, international, and full of promise.
When they married in 1968, the image seemed almost too perfect. The blonde American actress and the brilliant European filmmaker moving through parties, premieres, and magazine pages like a couple designed for the future. But even inside that glamour, Sharon often seemed softer than the world around her. She smiled for the cameras, appeared in beautiful clothes, stood beside famous people, and became part of Hollywood's dream machine.
Yet there was always something delicate about her presence, as if the noise around her was louder than the person inside the image.
Then came Valley of the Dolls. If Sharon had been moving toward recognition before, this was the film that fixed her face in the public imagination. Released in 1967, it was a story filled with fame, beauty, pills, heartbreak, and the brutal machinery behind show business.
Sharon played Jennifer North, a woman whose beauty becomes both her ticket into the spotlight and the cage that traps her there. That role mattered because it echoed the way Hollywood itself looked at Sharon. Jennifer was admired, desired, photographed, and underestimated.
She was treated as a body before she was treated as a soul. Watching Sharon in that role now feels painfully eerie because the line between character and actress seems to blur. The film was not only a career moment, it became a mirror. Sharon was playing a woman consumed by an industry that worshipped her appearance but failed to protect her humanity. And whether audiences understood it then or not, that image would later become impossible to separate from the real Sharon Tate.
The strange thing about Sharon's fame is that it always felt unfinished. She had the face, the publicity, the red carpets, the magazine spreads, the famous husband, the rising name. But she had not yet been given enough time to prove what she could truly become. Some actresses leave behind decades of work. Sharon left behind fragments, Enough to show promise, not enough to complete the picture. In the Wrecking Crew, she showed a lighter, more playful side. She could be charming, funny, stylish, and physically expressive in a way that suited the pop energy of the late 1960s. Hollywood had only begun to figure out what to do with her. Was she a sex symbol, a comic actress, a dramatic performer, a fashion icon, a director's muse? Sharon seemed to be standing at the entrance of several possible futures at once, and by 1969, she was preparing for a future even bigger than fame. She was pregnant.
She was getting ready to become a mother. Behind the public image, there was a private woman waiting for her child, imagining a life beyond cameras, scripts, and magazine covers. That is what makes this part of her story so painful. Sharon Tate was not a fading star.
She was not a woman at the end of her light. She was still becoming. Her career was unfinished, her image was still forming, and her life was about to change in the most human way possible. But before Hollywood could decide what Sharon Tate might become, the world would remember her for the one thing she never chose. After Sharon Tate was murdered, the world did not only see the death of a young actress, it saw the destruction of a future. That was what made the tragedy so difficult to look away from. Sharon was not a fading name from an old Hollywood past. She was 26, pregnant, married, photographed in sunlight, and still standing at the beginning of everything. Her child was almost ready to be born. Her career was still unfolding. Her life had not reached its full shape yet. And then, in one night, all of it was taken. The reports that followed carried a coldness that Hollywood was not prepared for. They spoke of the house on Cielo Drive, the victims inside, the shock of the scene, the fact that Roman Polanski was away, and the unbearable detail that Sharon had been carrying her unborn son. But facts alone could not explain why her death cut so deeply. It was the image of her life just before the end that haunted people most. A young woman waiting for motherhood, moving through her final weeks of pregnancy, surrounded by friends, inside a home that was supposed to protect her. The cruelty of the story was not only that Sharon died, it was that she died while standing so close to a new beginning. Every photograph of her after that became harder to see. Her smile no longer looked like a simple smile. Her beauty no longer felt only glamorous. It became painful because people knew what was coming. The public image of Sharon Tate, the blonde actress, the fashion icon, the soft face of the 1960s, was suddenly covered by the shadow of one night. And Hollywood, which had spent years turning people into dreams, was forced to confront something it could not edit, soften, or reshoot. There was no second take, no rewritten ending, no final scene where the actress walked back into the light. The funeral made that loss visible in a way headlines could not. It turned the horror into silence, flowers, black clothing, bowed heads, and a grief too heavy for the cameras to fully capture. Sharon was buried with her unborn son, Paul Richard Polanski, and that detail became one of the most heartbreaking images in the entire story. It was not only the burial of a young woman, it was the burial of a mother and the child she never got to hold. A future family was laid to rest before it ever had the chance to begin. The people who came to mourn her were not only saying goodbye to an actress, they were saying goodbye to the version of Sharon the world never got to meet. Sharon as a mother, Sharon as a woman beyond the posters, Sharon as someone who might have grown older, stronger, more complete. Her funeral carried the feeling of something unfinished. There was no long career to look back on, no decades of interviews, no later chapter where she could explain herself in her own words. There were only fragments, film stills, magazine photos, memories from people who loved her, and the devastating sense that her life had been stopped mid-sentence. After the funeral, Cielo Drive remained like a scar in Hollywood memory. The Manson case would become infamous, and for years the names of the killers threatened to dominate the story. But Sharon Tate's legacy is not in the violence that ended her life. It is in the tenderness of what was lost. She remains haunting because she was still becoming. She was not only a victim, not only a symbol, not only the face of a crime. She was a daughter, a wife, an actress, a woman waiting for her child. And maybe that is why her story still feels so painful decades later. Sharon Tate did not leave behind the ending of a completed life. She left behind the echo of everything that never had the chance to happen.